Inflation concerns are picking up as the economy begins to recover from the pandemic. I talked to local financial professional Mike Kojonen tonight about how we can better prepare for the impact of inflation on our wallets. Okay, Mike, what do we need to know about the inflation rate that's happening right now?
Yeah, well, the month of April, we've seen the highest increase of inflation we've seen in over 12 years. Due to, last year, inflation was pretty low because of the pandemic, so we expected an increase of inflation, but it practically over doubled what they expected to be. And we also seen the, CPI, the Consumer Price Index, the price that we pay for goods has increased. That's the stuff we pay at the grocery store, housing cost, sales, energy, energy costs. That's an increase from last year to this year, 4.2%. So across the board, we're seeing the increases.
So when you say that 4.2% affecting, all the things we're buying, what are some of those examples of that increase we're seeing?
Yeah, lumber prices. I think everybody who's going to the Menard, the local, Menards, Home Depot, Lowe's, we're paying for it. And my brother-in-law, sister-in-law just closed on their house, built a second home. It would have cost them $80,000 more to close on it this year than it was to start, and they got locked into the prices last year for that same home. So lumber prices up about 232% from where they were a little over a year ago. We're paying for it at the gas prices. We know that it's almost $3 a gallon, so we pay for that every week. Home prices are at a record high. The inflation rate on homes hit a record high of 5.5%. And we're also seeing it in the car manufacturer business. Right now, there's a shortage of chips, along with rental companies sold their fleets last year, bought a bunch of new fleets this year. So it's a supply and demand issue with the chips. And so we're seeing a shortage of vehicles. So those prices have gone up. I just had a client sold a 2.5-year-old vehicle back to the dealership for what he paid for it 2.5 years ago. So prices are just soaring right now.
Expecting that this inflation issue will hold steady for a little bit, or what can we do to prepare our finances for this moment?
Yeah, one of the, a recipe for a financial disaster is in an increasing inflation environment to be paying compound interest, on your credit cards. So get down that debt, especially that credit card debt. You want to take a break from that and start paying down that debt. I'm a big fan of using the snowball method. There's a few methods to use. The snowball method just says make all the minimum payments across the board except for that smallest debt. Put all the extra funds you can towards that smallest debt till it's gone. And then when that's gone, you can apply to the next smallest debt and so on and so on. What I like about it builds momentum. It keeps you encouraged along the way, and you'll see some immediate results doing that snowball method. And then also stay the course because people want to keep up with inflation. And we know the banks are keeping up with inflation right now. They don't pay enough. I think a 5-year CD is paying, about 1.5% lower than inflation. So the history just shows us to be invested in the stock market will keep up with inflation. So, but I will say, just check with your financial professional, find out what is best for your situation, your plan. But generally speaking, the stock market does keep up and beat inflation over time.
Last year, when the pandemic started, we talked about the importance of the emergency fund with people losing their jobs. How does that play a role in this inflation environment?
Yeah, that was one of the biggest regrets last year for those people who lost their jobs and they didn't have money to get by for a few months. And what happens, they end up using their credit cards, and it just creates this negative snowball effect financially, especially with inflation, and now you're paying compound interest, the same thing we just said don't do. So you should have 3 months to 6 months of your monthly expenses set aside for emergency. That's going to be in cash or checking or savings accounts. I know it doesn't keep up in the goal is not for that money, is not to make a ton of money. It's to be there when you need it for those emergencies. We don't want you drawing from your IRAs or 401ks and paying taxes on that, or paying a 10% penalty if you're under 59.5. So make sure you have that set aside. The key with that is do a good monthly budget, not a half-assed one, the ones where you just put it together real quick. Make sure you're very detailed and find out exactly what are you spending per month. And then multiply that by 3 or 6. You should have 3 months, 6 months set aside for that emergency fund.
And as we, of course, are paying attention to how our finances are working right now in this current market, we can't not look ahead as well, correct?
Yeah. Yeah, you got to plan ahead. Don't forget about revisiting your goals. People say, well, where do you start? I said it's good to start where you want to be. Look at the long term, 10 years, 20 years from now, and then set those short term goals to get there. And again, we all need money to retire, so that's what we're talking about, saving for your retirement. And where do you start from there? I think your short term goals should be, at least if you have a retirement plan through your employer, put enough money to get that match first, and then every time you get that raise, keep increasing it. People say, should I just increase it to 10% or 15%? I said, your goal should be to increase it to the maximum you can, the maximum contributions. And that's if you're under 50 years old, you can put $19,500 away in your 401k or 403b, 457 or TSP, whatever plan you're part of. If you're 50 and older, it's $26,000. And then when we look at your IRAs, it's $6,000 or $6,000 or $7,000, depending if you're 50 or older or not. So that should be your goals, is to make sure you keep increasing those over time. Obviously, there's other financial goals that go along with that, but you should revisit these every quarter to make sure you're on track.
So inflation is the new financial challenge we face this year. Hopefully with these tips, people can navigate it. We appreciate it, Mike. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome, Jeff.
You'll find more money advice from Mike on WCCO.com.